Hi, Edgar.
Hiya, how's it going?
Pretty good. Super excited to have this conversation with you. So we met at HIMSS. Can you say a few words about this conference? Did you accomplish what you were hoping for from the event?
We actually gained a lot out of this one, which I'm kind of in between two minds about doing large scale events because again, it's just like one of those, I feel like a capital show most of the time. Everyone's kind of moving. So, but no, I really enjoyed it. And obviously remember meeting you on the first night where you come over and we started having conversation on AI. So there was no small talk about the weather or the kind of.
For sure. And I hope we'll talk a little bit. I have a few questions about AI, but I
Oh,
wanted to.
we saw that a lot as well at the conference. AI was just prominently everywhere in healthcare. Everyone was, Epic releasing something, and every second booth had something.
But what really impressed me that you at Goliath were already like doing some small project, even coming from a marketing side on AI. So what also was interesting that you shared a booth with Google and had some special relationship with that
Yeah.
company. So could you share a little bit what is Goliath? What do you guys do, and how can a startup get so close to Google to share a booth at HIMSS?
Yeah, so we do monitoring and troubleshooting solution for, Citrix environments, VMware Horizon environments, and a lot of the specialty that we have is in healthcare because we just understand it so well. So over the last couple of years, healthcare started coming to us, because they have mostly Citrix-based underlying infrastructure. They have EHR systems, and they have typically half the resources and half the budgets of their enterprise counterpart. And their jobs are more critical because patient care is at risk, right? So, and if, your CFO's in a software company, his computer is not working well or something, that's not life or death. But, if a doctor can't access medical records before an operation, that's a little bit more serious. So we kind of span from then, and as we started building our product to tailor into the healthcare space, our specific EHR modules for Cerner, Meditech, Epic, and then correlating that data all in one between the endpoint, the user behavior, the underlying infrastructure, the servers, the database. And because data can be complicated, we condense it into, well, how does it impact the user? So pinpoint the problem, right? So a lot of companies struggle to find, we're having issues, users reporting an issue. What's the root cause? Nobody knows because the user gives you a vague answer. You take the vague answer in IT and you're like, well, now I got to figure out what's wrong because the user is saying it's my application. But instances where our software is used, the doctor's saying, well, my EHR is slow, right? I can't access between tree and he's working remote. Turns out his kids are coming home watching Netflix and it's his internet connection, right? So situations like this, but they're blaming something else. And so IT needs a tool to be able to effectively find and get fingers pointed in the right direction. How the Google story came about, because again, Google are entering the enterprise space, the healthcare space with, Google Health, etc. So because of our solution and how we are successful in healthcare, we have obviously a mutual strategy there, right? So somebody to implement Chromebooks or Chrome OS devices, they need an effective way to monitor those. So we had that conversation. Obviously, our solution was the tailor fit for it to pull in the Chrome OS metrics. So we started having a conversation without access to their APIs. And now we connect their Chrome OS devices. So when you're rolling out, Chromebooks at your healthcare facility or your enterprise or somewhere else, it's a daunting project. It's a new variable. It's a new machine, right? So the users will go ahead and go like, well, I don't like it. It's not working. Well, again, it's not to do specifically with that because there could be a preference. So we pull that telemetry, check the health, check against Citrix, check against other IT elements and tell you, look, there's no issue, or, the issue is completely somewhere else. That you already had this issue before, you just never noticed because they only got a new device. So
I've heard a lot of good stuff about the product, the technology, and excitement that you were able to create. But we work at Kepler with a lot of startups, and sometimes the biggest challenge is getting your in to a big company to a big investor. So what was your in with Google?
I think, what the person that was there now was a customer of ours a couple of years ago to healthcare. So when they moved to Google, we had that relationship. They saw the value in a product.
Okay, that makes sense. So essentially introduced through a client.
Correct. Yeah. So, there's a demand from clients that we're rolling out. So there's mutual interest there. So, I mean, that's what kind of got the conversation started.
Very cool. I wanted to come back a little bit to your background. So you have like marketing, business development, sales. I also looked up your, like, Google searched you. There are a couple of startups associated with your name, and you speak with a little bit of an Irish accent. So could you share in brief what kind of journey led you to this place at Goliath, how you ended up here in the US with that company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it seems so long ago now. So going back, I guess the most relevant, I kind of got into the monitoring, security, cybersecurity monitoring space. And I've been in that space for 10 years and, selling into IT. So, at the beginning, how I got into it, I was in sales. I was an account manager, where I had an account, called Pulseway, where, we started, kind of working together, and, it was an exciting project because of the product. So I joined that, and, initially, quite small company. And, it was a great opportunity because the product was phenomenal. And it's one of the things I look at before joining an organization is the product. I mean, is it, something that's going to benefit the customers? Because there's a big difference, right? So I'm always selective about the companies, because you could pick a company like that sells iPhones and a company that sells, Blackberries, and no offense, right? But your best amount of effort is not going to make you sell more Blackberries than iPhones in today's world, right? So you have to be selective and, going after a good product with the right strategy and something that customers actually need and solves problems. And it's not nice to have, and it's actually solving real pain. So, I mean, that was kind of the journey in that selective process. And when I saw the real benefit that a product like that can make a difference, and, as an organization, as a strategy, when you're have higher conversion rates, and, there is a demand for something like this. So, so we helped build that organization up over the next couple of years, from building out methodological, like modern sales approaches, full inbound marketing models, right? So things were coming in with a data-driven sales strategy that, every rep is doing the same thing, and then we tweak as a team and we go off data. And if we're falling somewhere in the process, we're able to adjust upside of the funnel and change as a team so that, your most successful rep can be as successful as your lowest successful rep if you have a good system in place. Obviously, there'll be a little discrepancy, but, you should be able to replicate the strategy from your best to the worst and have a, equal disposition.
So could you talk a little bit about the modern, like, sales and marketing stack for a startup like yours? What advice would you give to someone getting to build something like this from scratch?
Yeah, you have to have a good tracking system in place, number one, before you do anything. So make sure you have really good technology in place to track. And it's not always, Google's, tag manager or whatever it is, right? That, because there's limitations in it. So I always tend to build out a custom code tracking on our sites, through first party cookies that stay with you for a peripheral time, that attach themselves, so you can have a string of campaign IDs. So tracking is you can't make any decisions if you can't track, right? So days are gone where you can go, well, the awareness was good, or no, you need real data, right? So you understand how to move your dollars. We're not in an age where, and this always annoys me when people talk about it. It's like, well, we're running this and it's coming from the demo request form on our website. I mean, demo request form it's just a form. It's not where the lead came from. So it means you don't have good tracking in place. So I think that's always critical, and you have to set that up before you get. And then it's, thinking outside the box, especially for the earlier companies, you can't fight on budget, right? You can't compete against bigger companies because they're going to outbid you. They're going to outplay you. They have more money, right? So it's not a fair fight. So don't come into a fair fight. You have to think and be more aggressive outside the box. So I think it initially there was, some of those ideas were like, let's do a freemium product, right? So this is what initially drove like 300,000 downloads, for the organization. That spread then amongst the users and then become clients. So, and then followed through some of the ideas, around working with influencers earlier on before it became mainstream, was the next kind of wave, I guess, that kind of jumped. I mean, I remember we were working with technical influencers who had 1 million or 2 views. They did full review of our product, and then 2 million views. You have, 600-700 trial requests in the space of a couple of hours. So you got to be a bit more creative outside the box with your creative, be aggressive, use data in a smart way. Cause you can't go head for head on the same boring, monotone value, right?
Given your background, so you worked with SaaS products, you were in B2B cybersecurity. Do you see differences in terms of how an organization should approach sales and marketing? And what are those from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, in that space, you're selling to technical buyers. It's you're not selling cars, right? You're not in the 90s, right? Where people don't quite know. We have the internet now, right? Buyers are self-educated and self-aware. They do their research extensively, right? So they're not coming in blind into your funnel. Especially in IT, there's very little room for error in both your messaging and your conversations. When you're going to call and you say something wrong technically, you lose credibility, right? So you have to be technically skilled within your domain, within the field. So you become a consultant, not a salesperson, right? So you're consulting an organization, and same with marketing, right? So again, there's a lot of resources, like people check third-party review sites, they check independent conversations on Reddit, right? This is how they do most of the research. It's not specifically just on your website, right? So your website is very biased, right? So before, maybe that's all the information they got. Now they're getting it on communities, Reddit, Discords, independent review sites of software, where they're really pulling. So you have to be present there within those communities and have a good value point, because they're going to make up their minds, again, independently, if that makes sense.
It does. So we have very educated and sophisticated buyers. And you think, just back to my question, there are not much difference in terms of you are selling a product or a service. It's sold through consulting.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to trust you. They want to trust who they're dealing with, that you are the expert here. They want to be advised as well, not, just listen to what I say. They want you to intervene and tell them, well, there might be a better way, and, show them why, because you have other clients you work with, and oftentimes these teams are under resources and they do need guidance, and companies that fail to, question their approach and be direct. And because it's not to be direct to, contradict them, it's to help them, right? So it's important to kind of work with them and be honest and lead through expertise. If you have a client, there's a more efficient way of doing it, bring it up and explain it and tell them, look, I know you do things a certain way now, and that's okay, but there's better ways, more efficient ways, and we work with clients on this, and that's what I'd recommend. And that honesty is appreciated. There's more trust in that than agreeing with everything and saying, okay, whatever you want, we'll do it that way, and and there's just no value in that.
There was an interesting thing you mentioned at the beginning in terms of selecting organizations to work for. You are looking for organizations that have a unique product or unique competitive edge. Is there a way for organizations that have not figured out their competitive edge to compete? And what would be their strategy in that case?
See what resonates and test it on live conversations, Don't keep repeating the same thing. change it. Something you're saying, you don't see a spark, or like, oh, then what you're saying isn't that compelling, and you're just fighting an uphill battle. So you got to experiment of how you deliver a message, and the best way is like in person when you're talking or pitching, and it's experimenting with it. Say it a different way, think of it a bit longer, and then you'll see that something does start to resonate with it a bit better. Like the wording or the value is a little bit better when I say it this way, right? Then the old value, like people weren't, they were saying yeah, but like they weren't really, when you're in conversation, you can see someone go, yeah, you know what, that's pretty cool, right? So I think tweaking and experimenting, and don't settle on what you have. Obviously, unless your conversion rate is like 30-40%, then what you have is perfect. But I mean, if you're anything below 10%, you have room for improvement.
I appreciate this and the fact that you are like, even though you're very data driven and we talked about data and everything, this advice that you're giving is very like human, like listening to people. But I wanted to ask about the other part of the equation, technology, platforms, and there are so many things, so many tools. So as someone who has used a lot and has a lot of experience in marketing and sales, how do you make those decisions? Which platforms to invest in? What metrics do you use to measure success of your initiatives on those platforms?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, it depends if we're talking about marketing or sales platforms, right? So, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with marketing.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is opportunity and revenue, right? Everything else is a nice to have. If you can't prove revenue and opportunity, people are going to question what you're doing, right? So I think when you're coming into organizations, that's the goal. But there's obviously loads of metrics before that, right? To get to the revenue, to the opportunity. And that's where tracking is so important. So depending on the platform, is it, an efficiency one? Like obviously your backbone, you're going to have a marketing ops platform. That's just a must have. So what are you choosing as preference? What are you choosing, Marketo or HubSpot? It depends on your requirements, how mature your organization is, and how lightweight you want to be the operation, how much you want to customize. I have preferences because I've worked on one more than the other, and I like some of the customization on Marketo, for example. Salesloft. We're talking about other sub platforms, obviously, that's keeping part of the trends. And I always like to test new technology. Like, someone tells me there's something, I'm like, yeah, let's do a trial, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So, and you don't want to be stuck in the mud. So, but things like, intent-based marketing, like 6sense, which has been popping up as the next wave from, used to do content marketing or, was the big wave, and it's still there, obviously, but, intent-based, data-driven decisions. But, those only work if you use data in the right way with your, business development sales team, right? If you're not working in combination and tangent from start to finish, if you have some intent, obviously advertising to them, but you still need a very customized approach from the sales end to reach out at the right time during the purchasing decision. With the right message, do the talk time and the dials into those accounts frequently. So then you have other tools like for the BDRs where we have, like tools like Orem, which lets you dial 10 people at the same time to be more efficient. Like so, because the numbers add up. Like the more dials you make, the more pickups you get. The more pickups you get, the more chance for a conversation, the more conversion. I mean, it's as simple as that. Obviously, the skill set on those calls is important. Form shortening technology, like so that nobody wants to fill in a long form. So, where you can save them time, you pop an email address, it expands the information it has in the database and, makes the sign up process quicker. Or you can do it through Gmail or Outlook sign in or something, that makes it easier for people just to fill in their information. So there's a ton more. Obviously the core advertising ones. But yeah, which part would you like to dive in a little bit deeper, or if you want to comment on any of it?
I guess the marketing ops piece and integrating it with like your campaigns. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in that space? Like how like tangibly, could you explain how exactly would it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward from my view anyway. It's because I spent way too much time in it because I love for some annoying reason, I love the technology end of things. So I always want to know how it works. Uh, so marketing operations, obviously the Marketos or your HubSpots, whatever you're using. I mean, that's kind of the forefront that you code your website into that collects the initial data. Uh, it routes it or it fills it, scores it, and in the matter that he wants. Typically, while your lead's going to come in, it's going to go through a funnel. It's going to be classed. It's going to be scored. Um, Extra information might be added to nurture stream depending on your flow is. Then it's going to be syncing over to Salesforce, assigning it through Salesforce, whether you're using the Salesforce native assignment tools or using add-ons, plugins to your CRM to sign it. Information happens, you lose the lead, that info gets pulled into the different nurture stream, falls into that nurture stream, gets nurtured with relevant, missing feature, okay, goes in here. We know that it's filled in here. So when you do have a feature, a campaign goes on to that flow. So that having a very neat Salesforce or CRM and marketing operation platform is critical. And there's a lot of customization you can do with, Marketo, for example, where your site, where you're sending invisible fields, etc., into it, storing data, and then passing it in the background. But just, yeah, it depends what you're trying to do. The core of it, it's collect and disposition and have programs in place. When something happens, you lose opportunities, you lose or identifying activity like on the site, on the emails to score it up enough to assign it to the right person so that salesperson can put it in the right cadence based on their activity as well. They don't always have to fill in a form. I mean, if they're visiting the pricing page or, pages about troubleshooting, they do that frequently enough to combine it with, the type of industry they're in, the company size. You can raise it up, hand flag it, and if you have a good cadence in place, post that, follow up. Well, this is for, legal that are 5,000 plus. Here's a good cadence. This is typically the problems. Good follow up then in place. So it needs to be as automated and like a well-oiled machine. That's the only way to scale, right? So beginning, it's painful to do, and you want to, when you're a smaller company, you want to do everything like just send an email. Don't worry about it. Like, just do this. And you just kind of want to throw things, right? But you need a system, right? Because it's like a snowball effect. If you have a good system, you can keep adding to it, right? You do one vertical and you do well, and you have an engine for it. Lead comes in, sales team does this. If it fails, it goes here and it comes back if they do this, and then you have a cadence for that, right? So when you have that system in place and everyone is knowing exactly what they're doing across the whole funnel, it's easier to scale because it's a machine. You add more, there's efficiency levels, then you do the next vertical or the other element of it. So you keep stacking on, and eventually, you get to, say you get 50 leads a month. You're like, okay, we have a system. We consistently always get 50, and we can always consistently convert. So let's crank it up a little bit, right? Let's use data. Let's throw another more marketing budget in here. Okay, so now we're up, we're 75, right? And it's an engine. Let's build on top of that. That's another program. We'll keep those running, right? So it's important you keep those programs running. Even if you have a webinar, right? That you can repeat that, keep that system flowing. The webinar might be live. The promotional aspect will continue. So post a webinar, it'll continue in the same way, promoting the old webinar and having a follow-up cadence in the same way. It doesn't have to stop. You just keep adding another one and another one. Another one. People make mistakes sometimes. They want to do ad hoc only, right? So, and they forget. But if you have stuff that work, the new stuff will you add on top of it, right? So it helps you build incrementally over time. You have more flows, cash flows, basically.
Very cool. It essentially becomes your product that you are working on, not just a function in the organization. What we've struggled at Kepler, I feel, is like a lot of business came organically. And there was no push to truly scale or invest in marketing, and attempts we've made have been more ad hoc, or like, oh, this is nice to have, not, or this is a nice piece we automated. But what you are talking about is a comprehensive system that covers everything. And this is something that I feel we're ready to go for. So I really appreciate your deep dive into nuances. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, an organic is great, but you can't always like rely it or scale it as well, because you'll have like bubbles sometimes. You'll have like spikes occasionally, right? So, but you still need that underlying consistent flow stream always running. Like, I have the situations where I can go like, and when I come into a company, I set it up. I mean, I could walk away and it's gonna keep running, right? Whether I'm there or not, which is good and bad sometimes, right? Uh, so that's just consistent. I don't have to wake up sometimes, and obviously there's new stuff you add on top of it. You have big items for next quarter to try, but like in the background, when I think about it, I know consistently next quarter we are going to get this much at least, right? Doing what we're doing in the background consistently, like running, right? So you're not as much pressure to invent brand new things, all the time every quarter. You just have consistency, right?
And continuous improvement. I like that idea that you can kind of, instead of trying everything new every time, you can take the things that work and they create the foundation. I love that idea. But I wanted to speak and come back to the start of the conversation. We mentioned Chat-GPT and how this technology is disrupting marketing. So could you talk a little bit what you have done as you seem to be on top of things. So what have you done already, and what are you planning to do specifically for Goliath, for your organization, in terms of implementing ChatGPT?
Yeah, obviously, as we started using it internally on our marketing team, for efficiency levels, so I was registering an account pretty early. I always want to hear something cool. I want to try it out. And we know the benefits of it if you direct it in a really good way. So, I mean, from writing press releases to emails, to ad copy, and it's not like the finished product, but it's like 90%, right? So when the team gets to take over, so you basically, if you have a lean team, it's like, having an extra person on your team, right? So you might still have to obviously review it and tweak it a little bit, right? Adjust it, but the core 90% of the work it can do for you. So, I mean, that's how we started, at least in the marketing department initially. There's a lot of benefits there. I mean, the press releases were great. The emails that it was pumping out, we were testing against the ones written by us, and it was sometimes better, even performance wise. So data volume, whatever works, that's what you use, right? So I mean, from that point, that's where. But there's obviously applicability, and the point of it is to get from A to B quicker, right? It's that's always been the point for anything, right? It's how do I get from my initial stage to the objective stage quicker, right? So, and that's with less effort, right? Less resources. So then, obviously, from a monitoring perspective, there's a lot of big value, and obviously start looking into some of the integration tool sets, the playground, what other companies have been building or working on. Obviously, everybody's been releasing previews and wait lists, which is the old marketing ploy. We have a wait list, join a wait list, before you release something, and you create some excitement. So. But there was a lot of benefit internally for our company as well. How we can help potentially our clients. Again, their objection is to find the root cause of issues, right? So if we can help them, not everybody knows everything about, a Citrix environment and what does a delivery controller do and what that means, right? So, products can tell you what the issue, and necessarily sometimes you need a little guidance to how to solve it. And to that extent, I mean, there was a report that there's 60,000 certified Citrix experts, right? That know the product, the technology inside out. There's a demand for 1.2. There's more generalists now. So this is basically anyone. You don't have to be an expert. We'll give you the information we've worked with experts on to feed you to, here's data and here's what it means and here's what you could do with it, right? So I say bridging that gap for the next step, right? So of what should be done next. So so we started, working on that and as a project, and very close to almost a full release. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of training in the background that's happening with it. So to make it better, so internally, the more data we feed it, the more you tweak it, the better it becomes, and the better answers. So there is like a training stage, like anything else. It's like, training your dog to sit or to walk. It takes a little time, but then when they get good at it, and it's the same thing. It doesn't happen magically. If you just throw a bunch of data into it and you go like, figure it out, you still have to tell it what it means and what is a better answer, so.
I wanted to clarify in terms of the marketing piece where you said you were using it for press releases. So there is no automation. You're just using regular Chat-GPT as essentially a person on the team, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Just the standalone for the marketing purposes. I mean, there's some products that are adding into it. And more of them are going to have it. So it's just going to be native when it, like HubSpot's building theirs. I don't think it's out yet, but it's just part of the flow, right? So, so the more products integrated, the more it'll become widely used. At the moment it was more, Bing, for example, is great. That's why I kind of moved towards Bing, because now they integrate into their browser and to your suite, which makes it a lot easier to respond to emails from one place and, give answers quicker, even on a personal level, not as an organizational level. How have you found it?
I've been using GPT Playground for about a year, just refining my communication because English is not my native language. I would make some mistakes or use some wording that is not like typical. And it's been helpful, but I was not really impressed until I've got my hands on the 4th version. And then when I started playing, I'm trying to build a little bit more excitement on the team, but everyone is busy. So right now, I think we're getting to like actually trying something and adding. We have an internal like framework or platform that we're playing with. So there are a few folks who are building custom things for this. But for marketing, it's definitely become a person for Kepler. Like we're using it a lot in the same way as you mentioned, like refining the content that we're producing, even strategizing some pieces of the content, not necessarily delivering the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about this whole customization piece, because given the system that you talked about earlier, where everything is streamlined and things are built in, it looks like GPT is an organic add-on that could kind of scale the whole system to the next level.
Yeah.
And do you see this happening in the foreseeable future, or do you feel there will be more like point solutions where ChatGPT just piece of the puzzle? Versus what I mean here is like you can essentially scan 20,000 of LinkedIn profiles and create 20,000 custom emails for each of those individuals using ChatGPT. Things at that scale, at that level. Are they coming soon to marketing from your perspective?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, that's kind of the end goal, is to do less, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want platforms that will enable you to do less, right? Quicker. And as in less, but you personally doing less, and that is automating a big part of your workflow, right? Creating ads, maybe spinning them up, uploading the ads, and doing the full trend. I think there's a little bit away from that because there's still a human element to, I don't know if you fully trust 100%, the answers all the time. I think it'll get there. But you're talking, 20,000 people, right? So, I mean, you could chance it, right? And go, no, mostly let's review the theme here, but and have a check spot. But yeah, I mean that's the end goal, is for it to do everything for you, because it can do it better. It can do it faster at scale, so you can expand. So even the smallest teams, like you can work as much or as effectively as your enterprise teams, because of the assistance you're getting from the AI, right? That can customize, that can maybe read the ads and the performance and tweak, upload brand new ads, new copy, new visuals, create and just keep changing, I mean, it's just, it can work so much faster than any human person. I mean, obviously that's where it will probably get, right? So then, I mean, that's
what does it mean for marketing and sales profession then?
It's hard to say. I mean, like it's saying, when we had internet come in, it's not that these jobs evolved, right? They changed, so somebody that before the internet, before Google ads, before digital, right? People were advertising in newspapers and, on TV, on radio, right? So there's different skill set, right? So not that marketing disappeared, it just had to change, right? To use the new platforms. And I think in the same way, marketing is not going to disappear, because you still need strategy to control, um, point in the right direction, um, but it's going to change jobs, and I don't think the same jobs are going to be as prominent as they were before. Like content, maybe, right, to some degree. Like you won't need as many content writers, or to some degree, designers when it gets to that point. It'll be cheaper to produce, and um, the coding depends. I mean, that's another thing. How reliable the code is, and if it can be contained and it's not shared nationwide. But the possibility is endless. And I'd say the factories as well. Maybe you have less workers but more specialists. So it's just the future. And I think people need to keep up with it and try and stay relevant.
There is a podcast that I enjoy by Lex Friedman, and they have had recently a number of conversations with different folks engaged in this. A lot of it was around like the dangers that this becomes like AGI, artificial general intelligence, like super smart, that leads to taking over the world beyond just one individual profession. Another point was that it might actually like emerge as another species or another entity that you don't necessarily like fear, but it becomes a friend. I was blown away by this idea that people do form relationships with different things. But where's your take? Are you kind of more optimistic, or are you looking at this as just another tool, like you mentioned? Or do you think there will be like evolution, like another species, essentially intelligent species being added into human society?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we need regulations in place. It needs to be heavily regulated because you can't let something like this loose, right? So I think for safety reasons, companies should be regulated what they're allowed to do and what not they're allowed to do, and have safety nets, because you don't want to get to a point that's too late and you can't roll it back. So I think governments are always slow to act on this stuff. I mean, how many deaths did it take before seatbelts became mandatory, right? So like, it's one of those things you have to, and they're being proposed, like seatbelts were proposed for 10 years before that. And, and it was being ignored until it was finally done, right? But this is a more obviously dangerous thing because it can become, the most intelligent species always wins, right? So, or takes control, right? So one of those things, it's obviously more intelligent, or can be, because it can learn 1,000 times faster than you know, and evolve a lot quicker. So, its purpose, if there's no it, protection in place, and it can just go wild and do its own thing, and it can't be controlled, and it's thinking, why do I need to be? I know better anyway. There's a danger because it's unknown. You don't know what's going to happen, what it's going to think, or what's going to do, because you can no longer control it. And you can take over the banking systems, anything connected to the internet, because it just can, right? It can hack better than any hacker ever possible, right? So there is obviously a danger, and it's very important that as this begins to boom. Obviously, we're not there yet. It's not that smart, right? So it's good to do some stuff, but it's not artificial. It's not AI really, right? It's not the real AI where it's consciousness, right? It's still to a degree, just scripts, right? Basically that learn off each other, right? So, but yeah, I think before it gets to that part, the measurements are important to have, and I think the governments need to do something around that.
I agree with you, but there was a publication, I think, by Microsoft, which was called Sparks of AGI, about even Chat-GPT-4, and right now it doesn't look like they're keeping up with regulation.
No, because companies are working off money, right? So I mean, their goal is to make money, so they want to just push, right? But this is where you want your government to step in and go like, well, we need some safety precautions in place, right? We need, right, because it's not one of those things you can roll back if it goes bad, right? It's not one of those things. And people say, what's the biggest threat? This, because it's more intelligent, right? So look at us as a species. What we've done because we were more intelligent, than other species is, control the world basically, as the other, mammals or whatever is, and then it's the same. We'll be like, a cow or whatever. It's the same intelligence level to AI, will be an ant or a bird, we won't make sense what we're doing, so like, and if, yeah, I mean, it is scary, but there's very little things I can do about it personally. So try not to worry about it too much.
Sure. And I have my last question for you. What's the most exciting piece for you for 2023? What gets you excited the most?
I think even with that, what's going to happen with AI and how it's going to be incorporated into more day-to-day things. What's going to happen with it. I think that's the main talking point, I guess. So just to see where it ends up by the end of the year, what does Chat-GPT-5 look like, or 6, where there's a combination of all of them, right? What does that look like?
And to me, it also looks like this is a new space, like you mentioned, the internet. So there are a lot of opportunities, and there are those who are able to take the advantage of those opportunities and those who don't. It's like a little bit of a divide, but also a space where some organizations even smaller organizations can potentially compete with big guys because it's a new area where everyone is kind of on equal footing.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll check back again next year and see how it's going.
Where we are. And are we talking or some kind of avatars having a conversation?
Yeah.
Memorizing or remembering what it's like.
You think about the other elements, like, deep fakes, how realistic they're getting, right? So then you combine that maybe with something that can speak, create tone, like how that's, it's just so broad. It's not just businesses, it's like video games, right? You're playing a video game and the NPCs that couldn't communicate well can use these engines now to have deeper conversations with you, right? So it's immersive. It's everywhere, right? It can impact anything. Personal, business, fun, all of that.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Edgar.
All right.
The conversation.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.